podcast 12 with Dean. Welcome, Dean.
Well, thank you for having me. Is there a name for this podcast?
Right now it's called Us Austin Muted
Austin
because it's a
Newton.
chance to
I'm muted.
me to talk real with my guests, because I feel that sometimes in big settings, with a lot of people can't really have a deep conversation. It's very surface level talk, like how you doing? Or if people are assembled together, usually there's a purpose, right? It's not just open conversation, but this is the chance for people to unmute and unwind, talk
Right,
about their
right.
true self.
That's kind of how how in all the big meetings, right? Most people are just muted the whole meeting, so you want
Mm-hmm.
people to unmute themselves when they come on,
Right,
right?
exactly.
I guess that's kind of the points here.
Right. But on this topic of video and audio, I always ask my guests beforehand what they want to do. Do you want this to just be audio or video? And so when I do the edits, then I can just pick out the audio if that's what they want, or fix the video up a bit. I don't know. I don't know. Should I be having a consistent format? What do you want?
I think you should have consistent format, right? And the other thing, obviously, it's also as the show goes on, who you pick as your guest, obviously, is very important. And personally, I think having video versus having audio, it's almost the same thing because the content is out there, and you know, of course, if it is going to be on YouTube, having no video, it's going to be a little bit awkward. And so I'm good either way. Uh, and I'm sure you're also good either way.
Now, a lot of people when they go that I've talked to on the podcast, they don't want the video part. They're comfortable with the audio, not completely comfortable with the video. The closest thing I can think of is like Supreme Court, they still don't allow video of it because they're afraid they, like the news media or people will just take their comments or what they're saying out of context, you know. But with audio, you can't see people's facial expression or I guess how they're reacting, and so I guess that's less that can be covered. You can only hear.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think this also goes back to uh, uh, maybe also the title of this podcast, because if you remember back in April, let's say March, April 2020, when the pandemic first started, right?
Sure.
We were all very formal when it comes to any Zoom meeting, Skype meeting, team meeting, wherever you use on all this video conferencing meeting, and everybody is you're all dressed up, you're on your best behavior, all this stuff. But as time goes on, as we get more comfortable with this kind of telecommunication platform and ways of doing communication, you see people start relax a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
They started having coffee, on on Zoom, on Skype.
Mm-hmm.
They start dressing down. Things just become more and more, quote unquote normal, right? It just a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more comfortable. And I think really that's how it is. And it really depends on the guest, right? If your guest is not used to doing this kind of stuff, obviously they're going to be a little bit more reserved. If you have your guest who's on the regular talk to everybody on Skype, on Zoom, and all this, they're going to be more comfortable,
But I don't
right?
think
So
it just starts in March 2020. I think before that already, people were kind of on edge when it comes to recording or like when they talk to people, because in our culture today, it's almost like you can't say something wrong, right? If you say something wrong, it's on the internet or it's going to be held over you for the rest of your life, right? It's this cancel culture idea, or this political correctness. There's some things you can't say on air, and I agree there's some things that shouldn't be said, but this, I guess, overhanging fear that you have to like monitor everything that comes out of your mouth. Otherwise, because you don't know maybe like 5 years down the road whether people take it the wrong way or not. You
of
know.
course, of course, no, this I agree. And this goes back to what we discussed a little bit before. Really, is although this is called Austin Unmuted, seemingly it's a dialogue, it's a conversation between two people right now, Austin and Dean, but really it isn't. it becomes a public forum once this gets posted online or anywhere, right? So I think that's kind of where the cancel culture comes in, right?
Mm,
For example, similarly now it's a two people conversation, but really this is spoken to everybody who's hearing.
yeah.
Not everybody are here in this room, in this Zoom room.
Hmm.
It could be somebody who's who's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. So you kind of have to be very careful with what you say. And this goes back to the problem with start recording the conversation with friends into podcasts is because you may think, hey, we're having a good time, we're relaxing and all this stuff, but what you say can come back to you if this goes online because it's no longer a private collection. We sign the all this things away once we put this online, right? You become a public figure, and that's kind of the problem is you're no longer a private person when you start posting online. And I do agree, not agree, but I do understand why some people will have this problem who's been on this show before.
Right. But like when you say that it's not truly a private conversation, agree with that, right? There's still some things that are better said off air, right? Or
Hmm.
there's some things that probably too uncomfortable, or since it's the first episode, we don't know if to go that far in depth yet.
Right. Hmm.
But I'm still trying to be pretty open, like this isn't like sitting in class, academics, right? You need to have a informed opinion, or you need to speak a certain way, act a certain way, get dressed up, things like that. I'm kind of pretty open. Although I guess your point is that it's not truly a private conversation, right?
Yep. Hmm.
Because as soon as it start the recording, that's it. It's it's in the public sphere. You still have to kind of watch out what you say.
That's right.
But you don't think this is a good idea, like having conversation among friends, putting your private conversations on the internet, because some people feel that the content being posted on the internet is kind of fake. There's a critique like they're just doing it for the likes, they're just doing it for views, things like that. Like that's not my goal right now. My goal really is just to talk to people. But you think that eventually that maybe that's a purist form of looking at things. You eventually think that I'll have to transition into thinking about this type of stuff?
It's both, right? Because it's for you, you would like to have a pure conversation, and for you, that might be what your goal is. But I think it depends on your guest, whoever's on. Uh, there is life outside of the this particular show and
Yeah,
whatnot, right?
right.
So if, for example, your viewpoint is not consistent, not with time, not just today's how not just today how we think things, maybe even 20 years from now, some of the viewpoint changes. You may have to be consistent as well, and that becomes a little bit problematic, right? If this is kind of online, and that's kind of the problem. A lot of these cancel culture, it really for some people, it was just it's already kind of out of line when
But
when they said it back in the days. But some of the stuff, it's it does get described and turned into the wrong thing.
sure, like maybe 10 years from now, people will be like, Dean and Austin were being so fake.
Hmm.
They're trying to be real, but they're not because they're describing how they're act differently. I don't think so, because like, and the other thing that's one thing. The other thing is like I don't think I hold the same views that I do 5 years ago,
Hmm.
right?
We
Like
always
people,
change.
we
Everybody,
always change. So
yeah,
you can't
everybody
you can't
changes.
like some people might like to dig up people's past, and it's like, oh, look at this person that they said or what they said 5 or 10 years ago, right? Or how they acted in high school, right? But for me, it's more important how the person's acting now. How did they what is their current view right now? Did they change? Are they apologetic of the views they had before? It also it's like we change. You can't expect people to remain the same, right? But there's some
Yep,
things
yep.
that you shouldn't be so wishy-washy on. So it's a challenge to find that middle ground,
No,
wouldn't you say?
I agree. I agree. The other thing is also, especially when it comes to podcasts and the people that that goes on to any podcast, right? If you're
Mm,
already a public figure, then things are a little bit different. If you're already a public figure, right? Because that's kind of your life, right?
sure.
So you are, always hunting for being. I don't want to say being popular, but you always want to be right at that moment because you're a public figure, right?
Hmm.
And kind of your livelihood is it's being liked by the public. However, let's say you are a private person, why would you go onto a show and take on the risk of being potentially one day there's something that will come back and haunt you? Not saying it will, but there's that
Mm,
potential, right? For example, let's say 10 years from now, I'm doing a job interview, right? And then my recruiter or whoever HR, found a video online that is
mm,
not politically correct with today, tomorrow's viewpoint. And all of a sudden, hey, maybe Din is not a good candidate, right? Why did he post
right.
this? Why did he go onto the show and talk about this kind of stuff? 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And that is something if you're a private person, you might be a little wary about, right? You may not want to go on the show and say something that may potentially come back and haunt you if you're that kind of person.
No, it's not just if you're that kind of person. I think that's just like why take on a risk for no reason, like no benefit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Now,
that's
right
right.
now you are taking on a risk for no benefit, right? Just talking to us, and
Exactly.
then
I'm just
suddenly the
talking
whole
to you.
world sees
Yeah.
it. Right.
Exactly.
But
And
but
I don't know when it's gonna come back and haunt me.
yes,
Right.
but I think it speaks like you're willing to at least come on the air and say and put your point out there, right? It's not like your whole life you're just hiding in obscurity, right? Maybe obscurity is a too harsh of a word, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you can't put your views out there or at least say something, then what's to say that like you don't flip flop in like private life or like if you have to have like gumption, like
Mm-hmm.
conviction behind what you believe in. I feel like that's kind of lost in today's society because everyone's so afraid of this potential like it comes back to haunt them idea,
I
right?
mean,
But if
that's
every
yep. They're definitely a group of people. I think even back in the days, I wouldn't say nowadays. I think throughout in lifetime, there are people like this. I think majority of people are like this, right? And at the same time, you also see some of these people who seems to be have no filter on air, on social media, talking about things that's kind of really, really, really out there.
ridiculous.
So there are two type of people, right? And obviously if it's essentialized, you gotta get more spotlight compared to people who talk about. For us, I would say we walk a very neutral line here because I don't think we'll swing very strong into the left or the right. Yeah.
So I guess king of podcasts right now, Joe Rogan, right? I think the Spotify controversy recently happened with him. He invited some controversial guests, right? They had some controversial views of vaccines, climate change, and then someone created a video of him saying the N word over and over again, right, on previous podcasts that he did. You think something would come back to haunt us? A topic we discussed?
I don't think so. I don't think it will. Well, if it comes back and Han does, that means your show is doing extremely well, and you have a different problem maybe. But if you notice, a lot of this is I'm sure is over time, right? It's over however long Joe's been doing this,
Mm,
and a lot of time is you're trying to go after the viewership. You try to go after controversy because you need
mm.
controversy to bring people in,
Otherwise, too
right?
boring of a
Right.
conversation. Right.
Otherwise, yeah, who's watching this?
Right.
I know that there's a sports saying, right? Defense wins championship, but most people forget the first line. The first line is offense sells ticket,
Mm.
right? So how do you sell ticket? Right? You have good topic, yeah, but how do you sell ticket? You want some controversy. You want to bring people onto the show that people care about, right? You want that controversial stars, maybe someone
Mm.
who's been in the spotlight currently, maybe not for the good reason, maybe for the wrong reason, but that generates viewership, right? So I think that's kind of with Joe Rogan and all those big podcasts is you have to bring on A-list celebrity. You gotta bring on people who has the 50 minutes of fame,
But
and
he didn't
obviously
start
the
out as a
topics can go
celebrity.
open and
He
stuff.
started out like people he knew, and then slowly celebrities starting catching wind, want to come on, and then he gets
Exactly.
like
That's kind of
he
how you're
slowly
trying to
gets.
do it here, right,
No, for
Austin?
me it's
You
not
get
that
your
way.
friends. You're gonna get your friends. Maybe one of the celebrity comes on, and then he tells his friends. Another celebrity
No, like
comes
I don't
on.
want celebrities come on. I want the common person's view. That's really, I don't care
You
about
never know.
viewership,
Maybe you
honestly.
become no. Maybe you become friends with celebrity, and now all of a sudden you won't get this guy on the show.
It depends, because like I very slow to form friends. Like think about
Mm-hmm.
when we met. We met through John, right? John Tierney,
Uh-huh.
podcast number 8, right?
Oh, you're
So
referring back. Okay, you can put it on the site.
right, but like it, I wouldn't have just started out like 3 months in. Hey Dean, you want to do a podcast? You know, it's like, well, I got to know Dean over time, right? Like, Dean and I kept in touch after college, right? Or even
Right.
during
Mm-hmm.
COVID, a lot of people didn't keep in touch. Dean still came on Zoom to like for when we had brother's house time, right?
Uh-huh.
Or I don't know, just through just without having we haven't met each other in person for a while, but we still keep in contact. And so I'm like, Dean's a good candidate. And
Mm-hmm.
so my goal is to just slowly spiral my circle of people I know. And
Right. Right.
it's not to get I don't know about
See,
celebrity.
that
Yeah.
is currently right. You know, when you
Uh-huh.
start doing this, right? When if you do get traction, you're gonna have more and more people on the show, right? Unless you just go in, you just circle in rotation. Meaning, you maybe you have 30 people, that you go through rotation, and then episode 31 is the same person at episode 1, right? Unless you plan on doing that, eventually you might get somebody famous, right, on the show.
Possibly. But for you, you're
So,
always going to be number 12. If we do another podcast, you're 12.1. So as I'm going up the
uh-huh.
numbers with each different person, each podcast number is a different person. As I'm
Okay.
getting different people, I also want more in-depth conversations with each person. So maybe for you and I, we could get to 10, like as a goal for now, right?
All
And then
right.
maybe after we get 100, and then we celebrate when we get to 100. But that's just between you and I,
So
you
you're
know?
doing a series then. It's a series per person, right? It's a
I
series with Dean
guess,
right
yeah.
now. And then you can have a series with John. You can have a series with somebody else.
Sure, yeah,
But you're
exactly.
doing a series. Okay.
That's what I'm planning to do. Yeah, because it's
Okay.
also trying to build that relationship with each person, you know?
So
Because
I guess you're right. It is a rotation. So for me, it will be the first podcast. I'm sure 12 podcasts down the road, 30 podcasts down the road, it's going to be very different.
it might be.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just reach out to people I know already. Like I'm not meeting anyone new, right? Now that it's
Uh-huh.
working, it's like same people every day. It's not like college where you can meet someone new every day, right? So I don't know where it's heading. I'm not reaching out to like celebrities or like posting this on Instagram yet, you know, and like going like, hey, I'm starting a podcast and whatnot. Really,
I see.
it's just us
So are
two
you gonna
talking.
have like a logo for your show soon? You're gonna start selling
I'm having
T-shirts.
someone
Start.
design that right now. Not
Yeah.
t-shirts. I don't I'm t-shirts right now. I don't think so. I'm having someone design a logo right now.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah,
So
maybe
what's your first swag? Like a hat, a
I
sticker?
don't no, like right dude, like that's thinking way too far down the road. Like I'm just having conversations with people. Like what's you're
Mhm.
making it so complicated, you
I'm
know?
not making it complicated. I'm just give you some forward-looking things to look into.
If we do want to look forward looking, maybe the first thing is I got to start with a better mic or maybe background, right? Or
That's
maybe
right.
like
Yep.
an editing team. Like who's
You
gonna
need a
like what
studio. You have to
Yeah,
find
do I
people
need a
in.
studio? Right, right. Do I
You need a
want a
studio. Yeah.
studio? Yeah. Do I want and then but then it's like I don't know. Like how does that influence the casual conversation? I don't know. And
I
then
mean,
do we want it?
it's.
Yeah. Do we
Mhm.
want to eventually be in person? Right. That's another thing. How about like different language? We speak in Chinese, right? I could get a lot of more different people who just know how to speak Chinese on,
You can do that,
right?
yeah, yeah. I would
Right.
say if you want to, I think in person might be better. Reason being, I think on at least on web, right, on Zoom, all this, a lot of physical cues you're actually missing,
Yeah, that's true.
and you can't you really feel the energy inside the room,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that means, right? It's
Right.
on webcast and all this,
It
it's
takes more
it's
time
different.
though, because you got to get to the same location. You know what I mean? And so
Right, but the
it takes
thing
more work
is,
too.
yeah, but you make it an event. So for example, let's say we have to drive to a certain place, right?
Sure.
Uh, on the way there, I'm thinking about the podcast,
Okay.
right? So
Right.
it gives you time to think about this, and it
Sure.
puts you in a settings where you know you're doing a podcast, right? You
Yes,
are in
that's
a
right.
studio, so you get set up in the mood. So I think there is still a need for being physically there,
Mm,
right? Same with
right.
business and all this stuff, right? You can write email, you can call people, you can text people, but a face-to-face meeting has its it still punches differently, right? It punches at a different weight
What
compared to
about one
all the kind
day,
of
Mark
communication.
Zuckerberg's vision? You put on the virtual reality goggles, there you all are in a virtual business room. What do you think? Still not? Still not?
Unless you can simulate and stimulate the same neurons that you have, because a lot of this is still motor neurons, right? Your
Mm,
it feels different, the air is different, it will give you a different perception. So something right now, maybe Meta will help, it will do it, but right now, it's still different, right?
mm.
Even though let's say it's a video, VR, right, virtual reality camera on, you still feel different.
Dean,
Yeah.
you have an interesting background in not just education, but how you mixed it with kind of like business in a way. You PhD, right, in biology
In
or
chemistry,
in chemistry. Oh
I'm a
shoot, I messed
PhD in
up there.
chemistry. My master in undergrads in biomedical engineering. Right now, I am doing, I guess, kind of startup. So there's some business components to it. So there is, there's it's a different path. I would say, just a different path.
Right. You always said you were lucky to get on this
Mhm.
path, right?
Right.
So you
Mhm.
were you always felt like maybe you're being humble here, but you slacked off kind of in undergrad, or you didn't think that much about what came in the future, but somehow you got on this path. Like, so what would you say to like a younger person? They just got into undergrad, like during these Zoom years too. So maybe their first year was virtual, right?
Mhm.
What would you I guess give them as advice? Or you need not give them advice and go like you got to figure it out yourself. You know what I mean?
It's the advice is you got to go figure it out yourself, right? But if you think about this, unless you figure out what you want to do, unless you figure out the purpose, it's very hard to give any advice, because then it becomes, oh, I listened to Dean and now I'm this. I'm successful
Mm,
because of I'm successful because of Dean, who probably not going to happen. But if I'm not successful, I'm going to blame him, right?
mm,
Instead of blaming myself.
mm,
And that's kind of the thing here. When you are in college, uh, first of all, when you get into college, you should already know what you want to do, because that's what high school is for. But I think right now with our education, if you focus too much on the testing, if you focus too much on all these other stuff, you kind of lost the original purpose of getting an education, which is not just being smart, but you kind of need to know, find out what you're good at, find out what you want to do, what your interest is, right? What are again, what you're good at, and then you go to college to further that skill.
mm,
If that's kind of how it's supposed to be. And then we become, it becomes this problem where, let's say you get into high school, normally people are what, 14, right? And
sure.
then you graduate high school when you're 18,
Mm-hmm.
and for 12 years, your whole life from your 6 till you're 18, you never really thought of what you want to do,
Mm,
right? You just follow, hey, next year, first year, I'm in first grade, next year, second grade, and then I'll go to middle school. Now I go to high school. I need to take, was SAT,
right.
uh, and all of a sudden I'm in college, right? And did you just pick your life because this major sounds interesting, and then that's the rest of your life? So you make your decision when you're 18 for the rest of your life,
Mm,
right? So
right.
so I would say, let's say if you're in college, you going through Zoom University just like the rest of them, it's time to start thinking about what you want to do, in terms of what you can do
Something I
in
always
terms of
found
your
interesting
career.
that you've said is that you got a PhD. But when I always thought that like people with PhDs, they want more people to get PhDs. You know what I mean? They want everyone to be more educated, but you're actually not completely supportive of that. You don't think the goal, and this is based on what you just said too, right? The goal shouldn't just be getting good grades, or it's not the degree itself, but it's what you want to do, right?
Yep.
So you elaborate a little bit more. Why do you say that? Like this, I think the government's currently pushing people. They're like, college isn't enough, right? We need people to have even higher education, right? To get a master's, to get a PhD. So why would you be opposed to that, or not
I'm not
completely on
opposed.
board?
I'm not opposed to it. So this is how I see it.
Mm,
Is yes, education is important, but at the same time, you devalue the education, and then the education becomes less good compared to yesterday's.
mm,
What I meant is it's not that now, it's not that, everybody now has a PhD and therefore PhD is no longer special. A lot of time when we push more kids into school, uh, and then we don't allow them to fail, you lower the quality of the education.
mm. Right. So like the
And
curves
this
in
is,
engineering
yeah, exactly.
classes.
So this is, of evidence when it comes to high school, right? Right now, we are passing a lot of students who are not, had no business passing in high school. We're passing college kids who have no business in passing
Mm,
college courses. Are you gonna start pushing this toward master degree, or you're gonna push this toward PhD degree? Because if you do that, you're gonna have PhD who leaves college or leave university with a PhD and don't know how to think like a PhD,
mm.
or don't know how to act like a PhD.
Who's responsible for that then? Or is it gonna come like a hard reckoning moment in society where we're like, crap, people who are supposed to know what they're doing don't know? Or like, who is there someone like do the deans are the deans held responsible because they're there to ensure equality of education? Or is it like just an individual responsibility at that point?
No, I think this is very hard to say. A lot of this is not a black or white issue, just like
Mm.
most issues of this world, right?
Yes.
I think we're all to blame, because if you think about it, well, you just graduated from college, but 10 years ago, when I graduated from college is not like what it is today, right? And I'm sure 20 years ago, when the older brothers in the church graduated from college, it's not the same as when I graduated.
Mm.
Meaning, you don't go to college and then you have all this good amenity, right? You have dining hall is such a good dining hall, all this stuff and
Yeah.
all, but the amount of education certainly now is more diluted because you get a lot of helps, you get a lot of extra credits and all this stuff,
Mm.
and and
Pass
you
fail, right?
pass fail, all this mechanism that help you, because you know unfortunately now we don't allow our kids to fail, right? We don't
Mm.
allow the students to fail. We give them as much chances as they can to be successful, which is good. But real life, it's a yes or no, right? Did you do it or did you not do it, right? We can't say, oh, we can make up the effort, right? I'm sure
Right.
at your job, right? If it's Austin, did you do your job? You didn't do your job,
It's gonna
maybe you
hurt
should, yeah,
someone else,
you're
right?
not gonna work here anymore, right?
Mm.
But there's no, oh, if you're doing an extra job, you'll make up this job, that kind of stuff, like
Right.
extra
If you
credit and all
failed
this
this
stuff.
exam, you can take a retake.
Right,
Right.
right,
There's no
yeah,
project retakes. Right.
exactly.
When you're
So
before the investor, you put a bad impression, that's it.
exactly, yep, yep. There's no redo. So that's my, it's not that I'm against education. It's really, some of this we do need to go back and look at, because the quality of education is very important.
Yeah. I'm very bad at phrasing. It's not I never thought that you're against education, but you have to it's hard to articulate your view. Because I think maybe that's what goes in polarization too. It's like people like me, it's like I can't articulate completely your position. And so it
Yep.
almost becomes like you're either for education or you're not. I don't think it's
Right.
that
It's
way.
not that. And
Right.
then and I do, if for example, if you want a life in research,
Mm,
right, and you are pretty good at it, right, you have the prerequisite of it, I push you. I will cheerlead you to get your PhD, get your
Mm,
higher education, because that is required,
mm-hmm.
right? For you to be successful in this field.
One
But
of
for example, if you graduate from college, you don't know what to do next, right? And then you're like, maybe I can go to grad school, right? And I will say maybe that's not the best idea to do
mm,
because you don't know what you want to do, right? I mean, you can go to grad school, but how are you any different from where you were? You
you'll
got
just end
more
up where you
degree,
started again.
right? Well, you got more degree. Now you want to demand more salary because you have a
Mm,
master, you have a PhD.
mm,
But are you really good at what you want to do, or at least are you going to be good at what you think you want to do,
right,
or what
right.
you're supposed to do? So that is it's a problem there.
How do we solve it then? Is it like a society needs a change of thinking, or is teachers got to be more harsh, right? Because it's almost like the teachers are harsh, right? Like they give you a bad grade, people don't take the class. And
I think
then,
a lot of this also has to be with the education, well, the system of education, and maybe the culture of our society,
mm,
right? Because we also do need to reevaluate how do we train our teachers,
mm,
right? Are we putting the best people to be teaching? Right,
right,
and this becomes a thing, right? It's a perpetual thing. Let's say you do so well in school, you're the best students and all this stuff. Would you want to be a teacher, right?
no,
Maybe
right now,
hey,
no,
I want to go work at Silicon Valley. I want to become a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be an
right,
engineer, and then I don't want to be a teacher. So okay, then is it a compensation issue? Should we start paying all the teacher millions of dollars, right?
mm,
Okay, so if that is the case, are we putting the best people to be
train the next generation.
I mean, we kind of are putting the best, right? But is this the best for the society? If all the smartest, the most diligent people are all teachers, right? Then who are the engineers? Who are the scientists? Who are the doctors? Who are the lawyers?
Mm,
So there's this supply and demand issue here, right? So okay, we can put the best people, in education. And then who do we put in education?
the people who teach the best, who aren't necessarily the
Right.
smartest or whatnot, right? I know your problem though.
Right. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
it's it's it's kind of it's kind of like that,
gotcha.
right? And at the same time, not everybody has the patience to teach because it is a job that requires a lot of patience, and then there's a
Right.
lot of frustration. I'm sure of it.
Let's use Orgo as an example, right? I think we previously butt heads on this. So for you, Orgo is like we all know it as a weed out class, right?
Mhm.
This class tells you whether you're built or not for what comes after, because it only gets harder, and this is what you should learn, right? And you feel like that's needed there. You need to pluck out the kids who don't know what they're doing, right?
Mhm.
But for me, it's like I guess maybe they didn't get like a solid foundation, but if we are able to provide it that class, maybe they could get better, right? This goes completely against what you were saying like 10 minutes ago. And there's like, well, if you can't do it now, you can't do it ever again. Well, not ever again, but later on it's going to be more and more hardships, right? So I mean, so it's a good thing then that there's these weed out classes.
I mean, I think we calling them weed out classes is just it's giving them a bad rep, right? Just
Yes.
oh, it's a weed out class, cut people off. But in reality, let's say it's not work goal, it's gonna be something else,
Hmm.
right? Because as you go higher, things get harder.
Mm,
And then at one point there is a bar that sets the best from the rest, right?
mm,
So let's say we go into that. That's use military or team SEAL Team 6 as an example,
sure.
right? And not everybody's gonna be in that SEAL team, right?
That's right. Right.
And then do you start letting everybody get trained to get into it, or you still keep the standard, right? I think the problem
Mm,
we have now is we try to lower the standard so more kids can get it, right?
mm,
Yeah, they have more opportunities and maybe they're getting all that, but the quality of education now changed. So same thing, that's why we go back to Orgo, right?
Right.
I'm not a supporter of, for example, we are only gonna pass 60% of the class, right? And then it's a hard cutoff, right? If everyone's smart, now 90 out of 100 on test score, it's 60%, then it's a problem, right? I think
Mm,
that I 100% agree that is a problem. You cannot hard cut people just
mm,
because you put up an arbitrary number,
mm-hmm.
but you do have to uphold the quality of the education. So if, for example, if organic chemistry class students are having problem because either they don't understand it or because the nature of it, it's hard for people to get an
Mm.
understanding of, then rightfully so, right? And maybe this is not the path for you, right? You can't
I
say
mm,
every path is for everybody,
that's right.
right? So
I mean,
for
complete.
example, I'm not an artist. I'm not an artist, right?
Mm,
I'll be the first to admit it, right? But should I be passed through some kind of symphony class that I have no business being in just because I really love music? I shouldn't, right? I have no
no.
skills, right?
Right.
Same with the for example, the NBA, right? I love basketball. I can talk
Mm-hmm.
basketball all day, but I have no business being on the court.
Right.
So now should they change, the rule and all that to so I can play on the team? No,
Mm,
right? So
right.
same with all these classes. So if you as a student cannot reach the performance, cannot perform, on the test, on the exam, then maybe you shouldn't be in the field.
I'm in complete agreement with you. The problem is we've kind of used education now as like a social ladder, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
want a better job or a higher paying job, it's best you just go through college. You don't hear parents like telling kids, maybe they should start telling kids, if you don't want to go to college, you can start working, doing something, right? But the problem is like, I don't know, if you work, you get into it, you don't learn any new skills on the work, it's just a day in day out job. You're just stuck at that level, right? It's
That
like, how
is
do you,
true. Yeah, that
right?
is true.
So what do you do then if not go through for education? If you're not that smart, right? Not that bright. Not everyone like can sit in a classroom and then take notes, really process the material, and then develop their own critical thinking skills, right? Some people are just there to have fun, party, whatnot, and even maybe they get serious about it, right? They have such a bad background in math, biology, or whatever not that you can't build on that foundation, and so they're stuck in a way. They have nowhere to go in this world, right? So I guess I agree with you in
Right, but
that.
that problem cannot be solved by college. I think that's family education, that's a cultural background,
Mm,
social economic issue. Once you get kids into college, I think it's a different group of people. I think when then that should be treated differently because you can't just shove everybody to college, right? I mean,
right.
it's not high school or middle school where it's a compulsory
We've
education.
treated it that way. Do you think that's
Yeah.
why people are slower to grow up now? Because we kind of just extended senior year into college, you know?
Yeah, because it's a point where if you graduate from high school, you should go to college, right? If you don't,
Yes,
it's like, hey, it's weird that you don't, kind of,
it is,
where
right?
when it really shouldn't be. And I think that's kind of the problem here.
Now, what's made it worse is the pandemic. Well, some people say it's made it better. An SAT score now optional, right? Or some
Right,
schools don't even
right.
require it. So you don't even know like what these kids know as they're going into college. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. I
so
mean, it's a mission problem, right? And I the problem also comes from colleges now run, or university also run more like like an enterprise, because
business.
you do care about having more students coming in. You care about how much money you're putting into the school.
Mm.
You still care about education, don't get me wrong, but the emphasis kind of shifted a little bit.
Like my podcast that Dean wants it to become,
Mhm.
right? You have to appease the audience. You gotta.
Eventually you have to evolve, right? And then it's the
uh,
same with the universities, all this stuff, because people used to go to school so they want to learn, because they want to learn
yeah,
more, right?
right.
And if you think about it, PhD is supposed to be doctor of philosophy. you get your degree because you like to think a lot,
Mm,
right?
right.
And now it kind of becomes, hey, you have skills if you have PhD. A skill is not thinking.
Skills is not thinking. Skills are where do you develop skills then? Work?
No. What I meant is, for example, when you get PhDs, some people in my field at least, they're very good at cell culture. They're very good at PCR, right? Doing all this technician work, right? And then they graduated, for example, or chemistry, you're very good at HPLC, all the stuff, and then you graduated, go into big company, and that's what you do,
Mm,
right? What you are is you're a technician, you're a well-trained technician. You're very good at the skill that almost nobody knows how to do. Uh, that doesn't make you a PhD, right?
mm,
You're just
right.
very good at a specific machine. You're a
Mm,
technician, right?
right.
And that's kind of what I'm saying here.
Gotcha. One of the fields that you were studying in was nanotech, right? I don't know if
Mhm.
you currently work in this field, but you told me once that you don't know what this will go. Maybe this is the breakthrough
Mhm.
um, discipline, or this is a dead end. You used the example of eugenics,
Mhm.
right? It's like people thought like, wow, this is the way to go, but then like 10 years later, it was dismissed as fake science or whatnot. So is
So
that
I
an
think,
accurate analogy, or what do you? Yeah.
well, I think nanotechnology, uh, right now it gets hyped. I mean, it's been hyped for a long time.
Mm,
Maybe also because of science fiction and all this stuff. But any technology goes through the technology adapted cycle, right? So basically, you start from maybe academic, and then it goes into research, and then eventually there's like early adapters who will try this on and become mainstream, and then start dying out, right? That's true for every technology, right?
right.
So nanotech, it already went into your CPUs, right? All this semiconductor world, right? Your,
Sure.
your
Yeah.
your your computer chips, your TVs, your airplanes, all this stuff. So those are already nanotech,
Mm,
right?
right.
So it's not that if it's the future, because it's kind of the present. What we are trying to do, or a lot of people are trying to do, is start translating these technology into other applications. For
Mm,
example, maybe medicine, right? Maybe other things like transportation, all this other stuff,
sure.
right?
Right.
So it's not that it's if it's fake. I mean, it's real because we already using it. And then if you're in the field, some people are kind of hyping it, saying they got nanotechnology, but they don't really know what they want to do. Uh,
Mm.
and then that does give it a bad rep, right? So say, hey, maybe that's not the future.
So I know the nano. That's like I think nanometer, right? It's
Yep,
very,
yep.
very,
That's
very
where
small,
nano comes from.
smaller than the millimeter, right? I
Yep,
don't
yep.
know. I think it's 10 to the negative ninth, right?
Nano is 10 to
Meter,
the negative 9. Yep.
right? But I don't know. Like I know the number, but I don't know what it like. I can't picture that number in reality, right? And what is it? What exactly is about the tech? Is it the chip, or is it the robot itself, or is it what exactly is nano?
It's just it's a size, right? You know it as 10 to the minus 9.
Is that a human
That's
cell?
nano. No. It's the human cell is way bigger than that. So it's 10 to the minus 9 meter, right? 1 meter
Sure,
is a little bit more than 3 feet, right? For all the
right.
Americans out there.
I get a
Uh,
centimeter. I can get down to centimeter. I know centimeter, even
so a
millimeter.
centimeter is minus 2, right? Millimeter is minus 3,
Okay,
10 to the minus 3, right? So
right.
a millionth of a millimeter, it's a nanometer.
Okay, so what's a nanometer? Like virus, chromosome?
No.
That's too
Viruses
small.
viruses are microns. Microns 10 to the minus 6.
Wow. So this is really small. Like,
Yeah. But when it comes to nanotechnology, nanoparticles, all this stuff, there are maybe tens of nanometers. So 10 to the minus 8, around that. But yeah, you're right. It's very small.
so you're playing
Uh,
with stuff that's smaller than viruses.
we're playing with stuff that's way smaller than viruses. But this
Is
already
it?
go on to your computer chips, right? You have 10 to the minus 9, 10 to the minus 9, nanometer stuff that people already put on chips.
So Okay, the computer chips. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh well, but like, how do you use this in bio? Is it like
So
replace some part,
they
damaged
start.
part of your brain or something?
No. So what people are doing? Okay, so with the right now we have what these Moderna and Pfizer vaccines,
Are
right?
they using nanotech
So
in their vaccines?
there are some nanoparticles in there. They're liposome based, right? Just small particles. They're probably in the hundreds of nanometers. They're still way smaller than microns,
Mm,
right? Um, but it's when you're at that size, you start acting kind of like proteins, right?
okay.
So that's typically the protein size of the hundreds of nanometers. So that's why the nanotechnology is required because you want to be operating at the level at the cellular level, right? So if you think of cell, it's like a Death Star. Maybe that's not the best analogy, or a
It's the
spaceship,
world.
right?
It's the Earth, right?
It's a
Or
space. Let's
something.
say it's a spaceship, right? You
Okay,
want your
right.
crew member to be on this spaceship,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
that's why nanoparticles are, right?
Mm, wow. So that really small. So you think we'll be like controlling them, playing like it's like playing video games with cancer cells. You see that cancer cell as the Death Star, and you have your nanoparticles. No?
I don't think we're gonna be have like a magic school bus situation,
Oh,
where maybe we will, but right now I don't think we have a magic school bus situation because if
no.
you
It's
think
like
about it,
you
right?
deploy your protein team 6, right? And then you go take out that tumor.
Right.
You
So
like
right now
RPG it or something.
we can put markers on nanoparticles
Okay.
that will specifically recognize, for example, tumor
Cancer
cells,
cells. Okay.
yeah, and any cells that of interest.
Mm,
If you can identify the surface markers, then you can theoretically attach nanoparticles to it.
gotcha. Gotcha. Any insights on life through studying this type of stuff? I know that when we were in person, we used to take walks, and like this kind of relates back to what we were talking about with the education, right? I was really
Mhm.
unsure about what to do after college. Maybe I shouldn't have gone to college in the first place. I don't know, Dean. But like,
Uh-huh.
you told me something. You told me exactly what you told me now. You're very consistent in what you say, right? You got to figure out what
Mhm.
you want to do. Right. And then you said something that it's like purpose of life, they could say it's for God or whatnot in church, right? God has a purpose or whatnot. But you said like maybe God's purpose is for you to find out what you want to do. And then you could include God in that part of the picture. That's kind of how I look at my purpose of life right
Mhm.
now. What am I here on this earth for? What am I here to do? Right. Churches like don't do anything. God, but that's church's stuff,
I
right?
mean, no, that's kind of the thing, right? When it comes to the purpose of life, is if you think of it from a logical perspective, it does get a little depressing, right? Because ultimately, it could be nothing, right? It's the
Sure.
meaning that you give to it, and that is the purpose of life, right? What is your purpose, right? And it becomes this chicken and egg issue where, oh, what is
Mm,
my purpose? My purpose is what I think it is, but what is my purpose, right? Because then it becomes a circular logic of
sure.
what is the purpose of life. But I think the purpose of life, it's you do have to unfortunately be the person who define what your purpose of life is. What do you want to do on this earth while you're alive?
Do you think that's a recent development? Because like you think of all the serfs, slaves, or like people who didn't really have a choice. They were born into kind of like a class, right, or something. They didn't really get to choose what they wanted. They wouldn't have. I don't even think they would have had the idea like I need to find a purpose. They're like this
Mhm.
is my purpose, or like I just need to have food at the end of the day and I'm good.
Right, exactly. So that's kind of how your upbringing is, right? I think during your formative year and all the stuff that a lot of we're all lucky to be in the United States, first
Mm,
of all,
yeah,
right? Because if you and also be born around this millennium and also be alive around this time, because
yeah.
let's say we are in a couple hundred years ago, your
1600s serf,
yeah your thinking will be different, right? And let's say now we are in the age of space where we start traveling in the space, your thinking will also be different, right? It's in so it's really the purpose of life is what you define it to be.
Mm.
And in the church, like obviously if you can incorporate the God into it, it'll be the best. But ultimately when you first think going out, you do have to define what your purpose of life is.
So there's not like something sitting out there
I don't think there's a universal answer. It's what I'm saying. And then
for
this
each
become,
person.
yeah. So as for example, my purpose may be different from your purpose, right? And then
Hmm.
it kind of should be, because I'm not Austin and you're not Dean,
Sure.
right? So we all have different purpose.
But Dean, do you think that, like, I guess the universal thing is that each person wants to find a purpose, right?
I
Or
think so,
can
yeah.
that be universal? Because
I
some
think
people
I think
maybe they've
it's
given up even.
oh, there are people who's given up,
They're just like, I'm
right? There
just,
are,
yeah, that's it.
yeah.
Yeah. Or like, I'm just here to take care of my kid. Maybe that's their purpose. Maybe that becomes their purpose.
That
I'm here to
becomes
take care of my
yeah,
kid.
yeah.
Right?
There are people's
Right?
purpose, just the parents, the kids, my next generation, that kind of
What
stuff.
about messed up purposes? Like, I'm here to kill people. You know what I mean? Like, or like, like people who shoot up schools or whatnot, right? Like, is it that they're not thinking, or is it that they just have a warped sense of purpose? That's not okay, right? Or like, how do we how do
Well,
we
I
how do we
think,
correct it?
yeah, well, this become I think this then becomes it turns a very interesting turn, because obviously that shouldn't be the purpose of life,
Right.
to kill others, and then, for those people, they need help, right? More
Mm,
importantly, those people need help, and maybe there's some chemical imbalances, in the head, but they're not. I wouldn't say they're normal people.
gotcha.
It's
But
anomaly.
even like our definition of normal is kind of under attack. Like kind of like for you, like PhD, right? Sometimes
Oh
like
well, yeah, I agree. You can't really define what normal is, but at least when it comes to what you just talked about, right? The having the thoughts and actually act upon hurting others is definitely not normal,
Hmm.
right?
What about like Mongol society, Like they're constantly warring with each other. Wouldn't like killing them be justifying that type of society? So it's like the values have shifted, We're not riding on
Yeah,
horses anymore.
exactly.
So the
So
purpose of life shifted for
so
Mongols,
the
kind of.
purpose of life will always change, and then that's why I said it depends on the time and age and the situation you're in,
So then
right?
we're really
So
more products of our environment, really, rather than like
we are. That's why
individuals free
that's
thinking.
why that's why religion has such a
Yeah,
is such
because it
powerful,
gives you
right?
an anchor to
Because
think.
exactly, and then you can actually link generation to generation, because if it's all if all glory to God, if it's all to God, then the starting point is the same for everybody,
Hmm.
right? It's timeless, right?
Right.
You kind of not changing with time when it comes to this question, the purpose of life.
I'm still
uh
trying to figure that out. It's like, did we invent religion to appease this weakness of ours to find a purpose? Or is it truly we have a purpose, or inherently we're made as beings to have a purpose? And so we go about seeking it. And some people find it, some people don't.
this actually comes into the whole, I guess, human logic. If we touch upon this, is we all bias, of what we want to see or believe,
Sure.
right? How there's the saying of seeing is believing, right? And then some of us need to see it to believe. But how do you know what you're seeing is the real picture, right?
Right.
And we most of the time wants to see what we believe,
Yes, I would agree.
right?
It's
So
confirmation bias.
exactly. So then you're not seeing the right picture, right? You
Mhm.
want it to be what it is, but maybe it's not what it is.
So then should your world constantly be distorted, or like you try to jump into different environments to kind of keep challenging your perception, you know?
I would say,
Because then you can't form like a theory or like a
I
base
think
from
what
where
you
you start
want
with.
is you try to be objective. Uh, if you can step back a little, right? If you get too close, then it's hard to see the bigger picture.
So it's like a
Uh,
yin and a yang. You're constantly like, it's not, you can't teeter too much into being too objective and just too focused on that, but you also don't want to fall into complete chaos and just like have no like objective things in your life that bottle you down. You have to, you said step back, but you also can't step too far back. You got to step in, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
going back and forth kind of
It's really a lot of balance you have to do.
balance.
It's hard. It's hard. Life is hard.
Interesting. Hmm. So purpose of life, then I guess it's more um, invented rather than discovered.
You can't discover your purpose of life.
But
It's
discover means it's out there already.
it
Like
could
invent,
be. You never know, right? If, for example, that say it's already there, right? You just never knew, right? It can
sure.
become your purpose of life. Your purpose of life would would change over your timeline. Your whole life. I'm sure your purpose of life had changed.
So you
You
think
know,
it's not invented, it's discovered, or it
it's
could be
I
both.
think it can be both. You can discover your purpose of life. You can also invent a purpose of life.
Dean, but like with nanoparticles, right? Do you
Uh-huh.
discover it or you invent it? You can't be both. You know what I mean?
No. It's particle. Yes, you're right, because that's a physical thing. But purpose of life, this is an abstract idea.
But then the abstract idea is you have to form it. You, so by
Yeah,
saying like
because
you have to
this could
discover it,
be okay if somebody gave you a purpose of life, right?
sure, okay,
And then that is discovered,
okay, right,
right?
yeah,
So it's very hard to say. So, for example, let's say today you found an interesting problem. You make that the purpose of your life. Did you discover that problem or did you invent that problem?
oh
Like,
crap.
for example,
So
today
yeah,
there's an issue that strikes your chord, right? And then you decided this is what I want to do for the
it was
rest of my
already
life.
there. It was
It's already
already
there.
there, but you had to go find it, right?
Yeah,
So
or it could be
that's
presented to you. Maybe I say something and then all of a sudden it inspire you. Did you invent that idea or did you discover that idea?
oh yeah, we can't really know. We don't really know.
Exactly. So the purpose of life can be discovered or invented.
I see. All right, we're gonna pull ourselves out a bit from the
Yeah.
philosophy, the deep stuff, the deep end, and going more into something tangible, inflation, money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think most people I've talked to, they're kind of more fiscally conservative, right? Like they believe like money supply should be constant. It's like what are we doing printing all this money? You're actually one of the first people I talked to that's like inflation's okay to a certain level, right? But that was before this like crazy inflation right now, right? And we're like, I think
Mm-hmm.
this is the worst it's been since 1980s, 1970s, right? So what do you make of this? Is this okay inflation or is this nasty? Natural inflation or nasty inflation?
I also don't think inflation is tangible, to be honest. But if you come back to it, is this
Dean, steak or hamburgers
we
at this point,
we we
right?
have we have all these indicators, right?
Okay.
We
What
have all these
indicators?
models
Okay.
for the economy, and similarly, supposedly at least, we should have the at least the people who know what they're talking about, right? Be at the Feds or at all this Goldman Sachs or all this big company financial institution, uh, and things don't plan out the way they don't work out the way they plan, just like the everything in the world.
Sure. Okay.
And then after math, we form models to explain what happened,
Okay.
right? But that model may not be accurate. It described the outcome, but it may not describe the causes.
Do you know Peter Schiff?
Nope.
Oh, he was the guy that's like, I'm the 1%, and then he went to the Occupy Wall Street
Uh-huh.
movement to kind of talk with people. He has a kind of different view of economics. He feels like all these economists, people who supposedly know what they're doing, they're mostly like scholars, people who aren't ever like involved themselves in creating a business, right? And so they
Mm-hmm.
create these models, right? There was the Keynesian model of economics, right? That's
Yep.
like inflation goes up, employment goes down. The two should never go up together, right? But then what happened in the 1970s was stagflation. So inflation went up and then unemployment went up too. And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
what can the Fed do now? This wasn't supposed to happen. This defies the way of thinking, right? And so it's like, okay, fine, in 1960, 1970, sure, everything fits their model. But then the model didn't account for something that completely like upended their entire model. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
So
right.
it's
And that's kind of, what I talk about here, right? We kind of always retrofit the model to the data.
right,
And model supposed to predict the future, but that doesn't happen all the time,
right.
right? Kind of what we see here. So, and then this becomes a problem is it's you kind of have to judge it after the fact. And right now, you make decisions based on what you have, right? You have to make an executive decision, either raise interest rate, lower interest rates, all these levers that the Fed can pull. But
You're
the
okay with the
problem may
Fed
be different.
pulling them. Like if the Fed there is a good force working in our favor.
So the Fed's supposed to work in our favor, right? We are all if you're talking about personal finance, you're just reactionary to all the thing that Fed does. And it is a problem, and I don't think anybody has solution to it, to be honest.
What if we
When it
remove the
comes to
Fed?
inflation,
Like just
you
let
can't.
the
The
we
regular,
can't.
I don't think we can.
Well, no one wants to at this point. Well, there's a few people that want to, but it's never gonna happen. But it's like think like Fed was created 1910s, right? 1913, I
The
think.
No, no. The problem with money in general is you do need some kind of regulation. I mean, this is supposedly a free market, right? But it's not completely free.
It's not anymore. Ever since the Fed stepped in or government
Yeah.
steps in, I don't think it's free anymore.
It's not completely free, all
It
right?
used to be in Rockefeller and Carnegie times, like the Gilded Age. There's no regulation really on them,
Yeah, and
or if there was, it
that
was
didn't
kind
go
of
too well.
sidestepped.
Yeah, but that didn't go too well, right? You have all this capitalist people who kind of get a hold of the decision making of the United States, which is still probably kind of true today with the Congress.
But it's worse now today. I feel like people are still the rich people. We still like not there's so much like feeling about socialism. The rich are too rich. The poor are getting poor. Like back then, yes, there were poor people, right? That's why union. That's when unions started forming because they felt like rich capitalists were taking advantage of the poor, right? But that was like unprecedented growth in the U.S. If you think of the railroads that were built, the tunnels, that all happened then. Like now today, we still have NG Transit. We can't get like monorails or like fast trains or anything because there's so much like red tape, bureaucratic red tape, environmental stuff, zoning requirements. We put so much laws in place we can't innovate when we can't grow anymore. Isn't that the result of the overgrowth of government in a way? Because you've taken the innovation and power out of the capitalist hands into the government. And government, that's not a good thing either. Like because like they can spend and no one really who's in like who would look over their shoulder. Like all this COVID relief money. I think like 40% or something Bill Maher was talking about that like 40% of it went like or more went to like big corporations. It didn't even help the small businesses that it was meant to help, right?
Yeah,
So wouldn't it be
exactly.
better
Well,
for
mhm.
isn't 1910s better than what we have currently?
No. So I think that we're not looking at the whole picture, and it's very hard for anyone to make any comments on this. And that's why,
Mm,
because if you think about it, right, not everything is better back in 1910, right? There's a lot of safety things
right,
that's
I
not in
agree with
place.
that. Right.
And things can be a little bit more dangerous today to compare it to yesterday. In terms
Yes.
of, cars are faster, things are,
Technology is better. It's not saying going back to 1910s,
right. Not
right?
just that, the damage that potentially can happen is probably more devastating than it was in 1910 in terms of pollution, all this stuff. And that's why all these environmental things exist, right? You kind of have to agree with them in terms of, for example, workers used to lose their arms or legs, right?
There was worker
And
compensation,
yeah,
right?
and do you want that, right? And then so
Mm,
there's all this balance you have to balance. So you can't just say back in the days better, right? Because you
right.
have the good. I think the problem is anything that supposedly be working toward your favor eventually becomes this big bureaucratic thing, and that
Mm,
kind of stifle innovation. But you also cannot not have them because that's also problematic.
true. But I
So it,
mean,
even if you look at today's democracy, right?
sure.
Isn't this supposed to be the best system we tried out of all the system that we tried, right? So if you think about electing candidates, right? What
Hmm.
is the goal here? The goal supposedly is I have, for example, 10 people who want to run for the president, right?
Right.
Everyone has the good idea, the best idea, supposedly,
Sure.
right?
Supposedly. Right.
So they all want to do what's best for this nation,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Under that premise. But now, from any election, it becomes this: I'm better than the other guy because the other guy is terrible,
Sure.
right? Is
Yeah.
you're not putting the nation's issues first anymore. It's either personal attack or all this trickery that you throw on,
Okay.
and basically it becomes a don't vote. It's not vote for me. It's don't vote for the other guy,
Sure.
right?
Right. I
And
think,
then
yeah.
that kind of changed the nature of what you intentionally set up the system to be, right? Originally, is everybody has a good idea, right? And
Right.
if you lost the election, right,
Right.
you still want this nation to do well. You
That's
still
right.
do what you can to help this nation to do well,
Mm-hmm.
not become a, oh, because you didn't vote for me,
The
and
election's
now
rigged.
if the person does well, it's because what I did before, or if the person doesn't do well, it's oh, he sucked, right? I would have done better. No, you're supposed to
Right.
help that person get the job done, right?
Mm.
If we are all supposedly for this nation.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the problem, with politics. That's just one of the example. But same with the regulation, right? It's
Mm.
supposed to set up for the safety of everybody,
Right.
but then it becomes the bureaucratic thing where, hey, you don't have a blessing, so you're not supposed to move forward, right?
Right.
The regulatory body could be wrong. They could.
Mm.
Who is it to say whatever they come out is the best way to do things,
Right.
right? They could be wrong, but then it becomes this issue where we don't have the blessing from the regulatory body, so we cannot move forward.
Well, I feel something that's
And
been
how
go
do and then how do you get the how do you get the blessing? Either you have to join their club, right? And
sure.
then now this is no longer about the issue at hand. It's about who knows who.
Right. On that point, that it's not about the issue of hand. It's not placing the nation's interests in front. It's about partisan interests.
Yeah,
Right. One of the things that I find that is overlooked is how we spend our money. Right. I think you're not as concerned about that national debt, right, or budget deficits. But it almost seems like we as a society it's us, we got to spend more, right? Government's got to spend more to take care of American citizens, or for healthcare, for this, for that. But like I feel that we can't keep spending like this, right? Where's the money coming from? It doesn't make sense to me. People are like, we just print more. Well, that doesn't make sense to me either. Especially if we have already this much in debt. How are we supposed? Why are we tacking on 7 more trillion, right? If Bernie Sanders had his way, right? But then,
it's the well, I wouldn't say it's completely like I don't care about money, but it's really more of it's a how do we keep this sustainable,
mm,
right? Being negative is not a bad thing.
but worse,
It's a
negative and
bad thing.
growing.
Yeah, it's a bad thing if you cannot manage me. If you cannot manage this, uh, negative and growing it may be necessary, but if you start growing this out of the rate that is no longer sustainable, it becomes problematic. So I think growing a national debt is almost just like the GDP, right? If your GDP increases, and it means your nation is doing well economically, your because you want to borrow against the future so you can grow faster, then you might get into more national debt,
But
right?
we're kind of, are we
So
grow?
no no
Did we grow
so
more than COVID?
so that is the we actually I think United States grew more before COVID, right? I think we had to check, you
Okay,
know,
right, right.
but uh, I think United States did pretty well. I think if you look at the rest of the world, they tried to be a little bit more conservative, meaning they didn't print as much. So right now you kind of see the inflation here is more than the rest of the world, because they they didn't print as much money during that time. So I think this is just reactionary of what happened before.
Okay, but like when we print more, doesn't that just cause price the like because we print more money, um like a stock that was worth 100, well now it had naturally has to increase because of inflation, right? It wasn't real growth.
Mm-hmm.
Is it are we like inflating a bubble here? Because like we didn't produce more goods, and if anything we manufacture is like in China or Asian countries. They're the ones
The
doing the
problem
actual
with bubble is
manufacturing.
you don't know it's a bubble until the bubble bursts.
Right.
So that's it. So I agree. It's definitely an issue. It's definitely something we need. We need to
And like
be
we
a little bit
like you said
conservative.
invest in the future, but like we already talked about the problem with education. Like it's not like we should invest money to just get kids in college. We gotta invest money in like making kids sure kids actually know their stuff. But how do you make sure that you do that through tests? Well, that becomes like a bureaucratic thing, and we don't want school to be too test oriented, right? And so then it's like, well, if we can't use, we don't want to take too many tests to make sure where kids are, right? And we also don't want to make sure kids going to college not knowing what they should know. Then how is is like can we use money to help kids like help the next generation be more educated? You know what I mean? Are we really investing in the future, or is money just going down the
Exactly.
drain when
See,
it's taken away by
as you know more, you realize the more you don't know, right? And that's kind of all the issues we have today, because uh, even back in the days, is are we really addressing all the things that we supposed to address, or are we addressing the things that we thought we were addressing,
mm,
right?
right.
So, I don't think we're gonna have the answer here,
I don't yeah.
and I don't think anybody really knows the answer, to be honest.
Mm,
Uh, and it's really something to ponder, right? And then when
right.
same logic is, even at your job, at your work, and everything you do is you try to address what you assume you're addressing, but are
Right.
you actually really solving the problem, or are you just creating more problems?
We don't know.
We don't know.
I want to go back a bit though to the inflation. You says as long as it's manageable, it's okay. Right. But don't you think that like I don't know, when you were younger, interest rates were probably higher, right? Than
Mm-hmm.
0.01% or 0.1%.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's been at 0.1 or 0.01% since I was in high school. Right. Maybe that's not a long time, but 8 years, let's say, right? It's been like that. Isn't it? Is that way to hold down the amount of debt we own? Because if interest rate shoots up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we able to pay back our debt? I don't think so. With that much debt that we have, it would be that I
Well,
think
when the interest goes up, there's gonna be less people borrowing money, right? So I think
right,
it's that growth that we're trying to achieve with the low interest rate. And you also have to remember, we came out of the recession, I think, really 2012, 2013, and that's why people don't want to go back to the recession, right? So they want growth.
right. But is it? Or did we make the problem worse? Because that's also when the Occupy Wall Street protests came in, right?
We
Because of
don't
the
know.
government bailouts.
We really don't know,
How about
right?
too
We
big
don't
for
know.
too big to fail? We don't know. Like we know that if the government didn't
Okay,
bail out,
so that's say too big to fail is you want that to go away, right? What's gonna
sure,
happen when the whole banking system collapses?
you finally have new banks come in, right?
Right, but what happened during the interim? Are you
There's gonna be a
willing
lot of
to
loss of
have
jobs.
yeah, are you willing to have 300 million people, American citizen? It's gonna ripple throughout the world because United States
Definitely
is still a superpower, the only superpower. Uh, are you willing to have the rest of the world take on
suffer.
take on this?
And that's the tough call. Like personally, like to me, it's like it's pitting
Then
it would
so
make
that
me a
says
villain
to
to say
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
But
So
I
no, so that
okay.
say it's too big to fail, right? You let it fail.
Uh-huh. You let it fail. Okay. That that's when you give like
So So then the United States now lose the grip, right? Now it loses the grip of the superpower of the world, right?
Sure.
If that is the
Okay.
case.
Okay.
And don't you think it destabilized the whole world?
Sure, but if we propped it up then, and as we've been propping it up then until now, what if now we have a even bigger collapse where it's not just the banking industry and the economic world that is involved, but
Right.
it's people who are everyday
So the whole nation goes through the cycle, right? Let's say it becomes this. The United States was a no nothing country in 1776, let's say.
Sure.
And then in the 400 year, they're struggling for a civil war, this war that you get through. World War
Okay.
One, World War Two, you become superpower.
Okay.
Right? It's kind of like a cycle, right? And then maybe
Boom bust, sure.
then maybe now it's start busting, right? So if you are in power, do you want to be the person responsible for the downfall of the United States?
No one would ever want to take that. No.
Exactly. Right. So
they stave it off as long as they can.
Don't you think these people will prop it up as long as they can?
They would. That's why it's like a.
And that is true for everybody, right? All these people will go to Congress and say, we don't want to be the people who lost the nation.
Right, but it's kind of like playing hot potato. It's like the forest fires in California. This is one of the analogies I use on a podcast. It's like we didn't want forest fires in California, right? So we get like the helicopters and whatnot to fly water, dump water over these forests. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. You put out these forest fires. Did I want those houses to burn down? No, I didn't. Okay, we saved those houses. What do you know? Like we have global warming, places getting hotter, drier. The stuff that was supposed to burn didn't burn. Right? So you're just piling up, letting that stuff sit there until the next big forest fire comes in, until the point where you can't even manage it anymore. Like 2008, at least like the government could step in as an emergency control, right? Now you look at COVID, like the government has to be involved. If it doesn't get involved, like we
yeah, I mean, you're right. We are playing hot potato, right? But it's if you can make it to be tomorrow's problem, try to make it to be tomorrow's problem.
Well, that's the thing. When with you said, like Rockefeller's time or like 1900s was bad, but that's the thing. Government didn't have this power, or it would have been frowned upon if it stepped in, right? Mm-hmm. And it was solely contained in the business community, right? They had a lot of panics back then. We really have.
I don't think so, because no, there were. When it comes to the recessions or the depressions, it was filled, throughout the United States. We just weren't around at that time, right? It's not just it's definitely not just in the business world, and that was a smaller problem because it's not, it's the money wasn't as big back then. The nation wasn't as developed back then. It was not as internationally connected as it is back then. So we have a different set of problems compared to now and then. And we do need to learn from our past mistake and all the stuff. But you can't say, today's world will be, if we just do what we did before, it would have solved the problem. It would never solve the problem.
It doesn't solve the problem. Do you think we've created a bigger problem? It's like, I don't want to get chemo because it's going to make me lose all my hair. Well, now the tumor is grown to the place where you're going to die. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, then it becomes this problem. Do you want chemo and potentially still die?
Do you want chemo and potentially still die?
No, because there's no guarantee.
Right, I guess.
Cancer treatment, there's no guarantee.
Right.
Right. And okay, and then let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Let's say with chemo, you will live extra 6 months, right? You'll be in pain. Would you want that? You be in pain. You're gonna put your family through more financial burden, and also emotional burden. Would you take it?
Right.
Most people would. Right, when it comes to that situation.
Oh, really?
Most people will still take chemo, right? The family member, but don't worry about it, right? Don't worry about it. Take chemo, right? But this becomes a decision we all need to make.
Right.
Seems like there's no right answer. There's also no wrong answer.
Yeah, that's the weird part. Yeah, that there's no wrong answer. Yeah, and also no right answer. Fine, at this point, I'll take it. That's like our society today. No wrong answers, right? But no right answer. No wrong answer. Okay. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, so some people will say, "Hey, don't worry about the big thing. Worry about your life." Yes. Right. Yeah. At least get your life in order before worry about the the world.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But
We keep
from
control of the things we
my
have control.
understanding, well, at least from what I can see, right, is really this. We first of all, we don't know what we are looking at. No one really know
Yes.
what we're looking at. Even the
Right.
war, the inflation, all the stuff, right? We
Uh-huh.
have maybe fragments of information from the media, maybe fragment of information from your own personal experience or
Hmm.
what you can see or hear around you, right?
Right.
But it's never the whole picture.
Never the whole picture.
Yeah.
Mm, agreed.
So worry about your life first.
Right.
Yeah.
Dean, I think that's a good way to wrap up our session today.
All right, sounds
Do you
good.
have anything you want to add?
No, look forward to the next podcast.
Awesome. And so thanks for coming on. And also look forward talking with you again next podcast.
All right. Talk to you
All
soon.
right. Enjoying
Have a good
everyone.
one.